Alright, so today's going to be a little bit different video. There's no flying, weather's not good, there's a lot of wind, so I decided to go ahead and touch on another subject that I've been wanting to make since I got into the Walksnail stuff. I've noticed a number of questions and some of the videos I've seen where there seems to be a little bit of confusion about it. So I thought I'd kind of clarify. We're talking about the recorded files and the OSD with Walksnail. Now we have the eSky Eagle. This is the little eagle that we've been flying in all the recent Walksnail videos. See, we have the Walksnail camera on a 3D printed pan and tilt mount right up here. I'll put the link to these files for anyone that might want them, but they're also linked on the community tab. I put them there recently for the people that had been asking for them. So you can find them there if you're interested, but not to stray too far off topic. Getting back to the Walksnail, you can see I have my antennas up here, and the Walksnail transmitter is mounted right here. Now, when you're flying with Walksnail, you do have an onboard recording on the transmitter right here. And there's only 8 gigabytes of built-in storage, and the 8 gigs fills up rather quick when you're recording at 1080p and 60 frames per second. Pretty much every flight I've ever made, I filled that 8 gigs up well before the end of the flight. So it's probably fine for the quads and multi-rotors and where you're not really flying a long time. But with fixed wing, I can easily fly this little plane, you know, a half hour pretty much every time I fly it. It should be capable of about an hour or even more if I put a bigger battery, but you're not going to get anywhere near that amount of time with the built-in 8 gigs. So you probably won't see a lot of footage from me on my channel anyway using the onboard storage. But for the people interested, it's there. You have 8 gigs of storage. That's not expandable. You don't have an SD card slot or anything. I think that would be my #1 request if I were able to make requests to Cadix, and I have. I've sent them messages and asked for it, but who knows if they'll ever get around to it or not. But I would like to see a version of the transmitter with either more storage, at least 32 gigs, possibly an SD card slot where it's just expandable, you run whatever you want in it. I would be really grateful to see that. I think a lot of other people would too, especially fixed wing pilots. So you do get that onboard recording there. And I'm flying with the VRX. Again, I don't use goggles. I fly, being a fixed wing pilot, I like to fly with a monitor here from my house and my shop. It's just more comfortable for me wearing eyeglasses too. I haven't ever really been able to find goggles that work well with my glasses, and given my prescription, I do have some astigmatism that's difficult to do without prescription lenses. So the only goggles I really ever enjoyed flying with were Fat Sharks with prescription lenses in the little inserts in those. So it gets kind of expensive to have custom lenses cut, but it is what it is. I'm flying with the VRX, and that's the point of the video. But whether you're flying with the VRX or the Walksnail goggles, they both record to an SD card. There's an SD card slot. I'm running a Samsung. It's one of the little green and white Samsung Evo Select. Trying to see the rating here. It's a class 10 U1. Nothing special. It's kind of a slow card as far as SD cards go, and my webcam that I'm recording this is not going to autofocus on this right now. But take my word for it. It's a green and white 32 gig Samsung Evo that I record in the receiver with. And just if you're curious, I'm running the 2 low gain triple feet patch antennas on here. I do have the larger, the bigger arrays that I'll probably get onto at a later date. But for now, everything I've flown has been in this configuration. It's just the VRX mounted on a tripod with these 2 triple feet patch arrays on the top, the 2 built-in patches on the bottom. And I have a little micro HDMI to full-size HDMI adapter cable plugged into the receiver. Then I run HDMI back into my shop. I have a little 3S LiPo strapped to the tripod with a power adapter. Just plug the little barrel connector in, receiver boots up and runs. So that's my setup. That's my ground setup for those that are curious. And like I said, the point of the video today, we're going to be talking about the different recordings. So once again, you have the onboard recording, you have the recording in the video receiver, which this one does include the OSD files in the latest firmware. I believe, pretty sure it's in the latest stable. I'm running the latest beta, but I believe it's also in the latest stable firmware. But it does record the OSD file, and you can have that either in playback in the goggles or the receiver. You can switch on the OSD playback so it'll overlay that OSD information while you're playing back the recordings in the goggles or receiver. And you can also use a nice tool from Kirik, who's a member of the community, who's given us as free open source tool. I'll have a link to that down below, and you can use that to overlay that file, that OSD file, onto your video file without using a video editor or anything. You just load these into the little tool, and it spits out a nice, either a PNG graphic sequence or baked onto a video file. And we're going to look at that later. That's kind of the main purpose of this video. And speaking of OSD overlays and fonts and things and custom tools and stuff like that, Sneaky FPV also has a nice set of custom fonts. There's 3 fonts. I'm trying to remember the name of them, but I can't right off the top of my head. I know there's Sphere, Contrax, and I don't remember the first, the more normal looking one, but the other 2 are more modern looking. I've been running the Contrax is the one, and Sphere is a little bit even more kind of sci-fi modernish, I would say. And the other one that I couldn't remember is Blinder. That's the one that looks more standard. And the Walksnail system actually comes with the standard ArduPilot. I'm only using this with ArduPilot right now, but it comes with a standard ArduPilot font, which looks just like the one with the analog ArduPilot systems. So if that's your taste, it's already built in. You don't have to do anything. Just switch it on and use it. But I like Sneaky FPV's fonts, and I'll have a link down to that below. And both Kirik's tool and Sneaky FPV's fonts, they are created by community members like me and you that just kind of do this as a hobby, and they do both have a link to support them and make a financial contribution to kind of give back and further entice them to keep doing it, I guess. So if you appreciate their work, do consider that. I thought I should probably mention that and give them a plug, because we're going to be showing off their fonts, both their fonts and Kirik's tool. So I thought it was the right thing to do. So without further ado, I think we've pretty much covered everything here. We're actually going to go back to the computer in the house rather, where I do all of my editing, because I'm going to show my video editor and things like that. And we'll get on to showing what the files look like and what you can and can't do with them, and some of the shortcomings and things to be aware of and all that good stuff. So hopefully it's informative, and give me a like, thumbs up, subscribe, whatever. Questions, comments, go below the video. But we'll get on to the second half of this video that we'll record inside now, so we'll get to that. Alright, so we're back at the computer in the house now. So like I said, we're going to take a look at the recordings. Now, when I fly, this is for a typical flight, I have recordings from three places. I have what I record on the PC, what I record on the video receiver, and what I record on the video transmitter. Now, most people are not going to be sitting at a computer and recording on the PC. You'll have your video receiver recording and your video transmitter recording. I record with an HDMI capture device at my PC just so that I can show, an actual live feed. So if we just skip ahead right here to where we're in the air, this is what my typical live feed looks like. And you can see up here these 2 little SD card icons with the flashing red indicators that show the recording and how much space is left. This, as well as the values down along the bottom of the screen down here. These are all part of the built-in OSD in the video receiver or the goggles. And it doesn't actually record this onto the video files that it records in the receiver and the transmitter. So this is not part of the actual of the OSD. The OSD recording is the flight controller OSD, which is everything else you see. Data from your actual flight controller. So anytime you see these storage icons and this particular look down here for these, because these are saved, these values are saved in a subtitle file, an SRT file, but that's a little bit different that we'll get into later. But anytime you see these storage icons, you can pretty much assume someone is recording the output from the goggles or the video receiver. And this is an actual live view of what they see while flying. And while we're talking about that, like I mentioned, this onboard storage here, you can see at the beginning of the flight, it actually starts out formatted at 6.8 gigs free. They call it 8 gigabytes, but formatted it's 6.8. And you can watch that counts down to right along here is about when we lost right there. It ran out of storage at like 18 minutes, 25 seconds into the flight. So that's the maximum amount of time you're going to get with the onboard storage, and it may vary a little bit. I'm assuming they're recording at a variable bit rate, but I could be wrong about that. But it should be roughly 18.5 minutes of flight time. Now this one is recording at 1080p 60 frames per second on board. So if you drop that down to 720p, you could get a little bit more flight time, obviously. I'm assuming they're going to use a less bit rate for lower resolution. But again, it's just something I haven't verified. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. So that's the onboard, or the actual live output recording that I get on my computer when I fly, what it looks like. And like I said, just take note of these little recording icons, storage icons, whatever, as well as the info along the bottom of the screen here. Well, actually, none of the OSD is going to show up in the video receiver files. This is what you get off of the video receiver SD card after a flight. You see it kind of splits it into, one flight is done in 3 separate files. I believe it starts a new file every 10 minutes. This one's 9 minutes, 53 seconds. This one is, well, the end of the flight was 7 minutes, 9 seconds. So basically this is the same thing, just recorded in the receiver. And it's going to look pretty much the same, just without the OSD. Now, if you play this file back in the receiver or goggles, you can have the OSD playback, and it will overlay the flight controller OSD. You see that data is saved here in the OSD file. There's one for each video file. And like I said, you also have a subtitle file for each of your video files in the receiver. Now once again, let's just pick one and we'll start playing it. And if we turn on subtitles, you can see that's basically the same info that's along the bottom of the screen with the goggles. You have your signal level, channel number, flight time. This is the battery for the transmitter and the ground battery, which is battery power in the receiver or goggles, and your delay and your bit rate, and a rough estimate on distance, which is done using time of flight. Basically calculating the delay in the signal, and they kind of do some math and give you a pretty good estimate of your distance. Now you might notice, I want to jump back a little bit. There's little parts of the video here. This is roughly 4 miles out. This was on my 4-mile flight, and I started to have some video kind of dropping out. And if you pay attention to the flight timer, which is counting in seconds, you'll see it sort of skips. It did right there. That's basically, if we look back at the PC recording, what I actually saw during that time, which is like right here. Right there, you see we're kind of dropping frames. We're losing little bits of video. It's kind of pausing. This shows what I actually saw in real time, including those pauses. But what's recorded on the receiver, basically it just, between the last good frame and the next good frame, when it actually had no video for a split second, it just throws that out and stacks the 2 frames next to each other. So you get these little kind of skips, little jumps ahead in time, basically. And that causes an issue I noticed with the OSD. Obviously everything stays in sync here because I'm just kind of recording what I'm seeing. But when you use the OSD overlay tool that we're going to take a look at in a minute to overlay the OSD onto the video receiver file that has these little skips in time, the OSD doesn't have those little skips. And the more of those you have in your video, the farther it'll eventually get out of sync. Most of the time it's not going to be a problem. But if you are flying pretty far distance and you're losing video, or if you're flying with a lot of obstructions, losing video with a quad or whatever you might be doing, then it may be an issue. And again, this may be something that gets corrected later. It's just something that I noticed. Like I said, I wanted to point out some of the shortcomings as well as some of the features and things that I do like about it. And I also want to point out this kind of flashing red border around the video right now. This is their warning to let you know that your signal is low. And again, you'll only see that on the video receiver output. Now this is where I was kind of talking about some other stuff with my mission planner screen. So I'll just kind of skip back. So yeah, that flashing red border is only seen live in your goggles or from your video receiver output. And that's why we see it here, because I'm recording that video receiver output. So that's what I see on the PC and what's recorded on the video receiver. And then you also have a video transmitter recording. Now I only have one file on here because I had it turned on to do loop recording, and basically when the 8 gigabytes of storage fills up, it deletes the oldest file to start a new one. And after this flight, I had started playing around with some things on the ground, and I armed my flight controller, which started recording, and it threw out some of my videos. The only one I had left was the last bit of the flight. So I can't show you that same specific little area where I was losing video at 4 miles, but just it's basically this is being recorded on the video transmitter, and in a situation like that where you're losing video on the ground, this is just recording straight from the camera to the video transmitter on board, and you never lose any video. Everything's just smooth and full quality, full frame rate, no lost frames, no reduction in bit rate or anything. It's just basically a raw recording on board. So to me, I mean, I don't see a lot of difference in quality versus what I get on the ground. Obviously, you'll see the quality reduced a little bit when you're in absolute lowest bit rate and worst signal. Right before you do start dropping the video, it'll kind of degrade in quality a bit. But even down to like 5 megabits on the bit rate, it still, to me, it looks pretty much as good as the onboard recordings. So I typically don't bother with this. And especially because of the limited storage on board, I don't get a whole flight anyway. And another issue is that the OSD files, if you wanted to overlay the OSD onto these onboard recordings, you can do that. But it's going to take a little bit more work because they're not synced the same as in the video receiver files. You know, these files are stopped and started. It stops one file and starts a new one independent of what the receiver is doing. So that could be an issue. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is using these OSD files and SRT files. Obviously, like I said, when you're playing a video, if you just want to include the subtitles, it's going to show you that extra bit of info along the bottom there in your player, if you're just watching it back on the ground or whatever. And I did notice that these do stay synced. Like I said, we'll go back to a point where we were losing video. And if you watch that timer, you can see it kind of skip ahead. When the video skips ahead, so does the timer. So that kind of seems to be staying in sync. You kind of see it happen right there. But you can also use these SRTs in the overlay tool that we're going to look at, as well as in your editor if your editor supports subtitle files, to basically burn them into the video that you're outputting. You can do that as well. So the first tool we want to look at is the OSD generator. First, I want to show you the website for that though. So let me move that over here. So this is from Kirik. He calls it the WSOSD-PY, whatever. Window title is actually Walksnail OSD overlay tool. And if you want to get that, you just come here and grab the latest release, which is currently 0.7 beta, which was released about a week ago. And like I said, these are community members that are doing this and providing it free of charge. So if you do like it and appreciate it, consider supporting them. He has a Buy Me a Coffee link. And we're also going to take a look at Sneaky FPV's fonts, who also has the same link to support him as well. He has HD OSD fonts for FPV. This is not just Walksnail, but he also has it for the WTF OS, and this is like a DJI thing, as well as HD0. But obviously we're talking about Walksnail, we're interested in these. And we're going to be using the ArduPilot fonts, but he also has them for Betaflight and iNav. If you read this README, I think this is the one that kind of explains there's an issue right now with iNav, or no, this is just basically tells you how to install them. You basically just unzip it, copy it to your SD card, go into your goggles or receiver menu and hit update fonts, and it loads your custom font and you're good to go. Maybe it was in the iNav folder. Yeah. If you read this file, it's going to tell you that there's an issue right now that the custom fonts on Walksnail as of current firmware is not properly supported. They will work to some degree, but it is a problem with flight controller firmware that uses multi-page fonts like iNav currently does. It can't refer to characters on the second page. And basically, what it results as is you'll get random wrong characters in your OSD. And that we're just kind of waiting for Walksnail to fix that. That's only an issue at the moment with iNav, but I do believe that Betaflight is also going to be using a multi-page OSD font in the near future, if they're not already. So it'll become an issue there as well, unless Walksnail fixes it first. It's just something to be aware of. But everything's good to go with current versions of Betaflight as far as I know, and ArduPilot. So you just basically want to go there and download the folder for 1.4. I'm not sure why 1.3 was still up, but whatever, 1.4 is the latest, just get the latest one. So now that we've taken a look at their websites for those, we can actually open. This is basically just the download for the OSD tool that's extracted here. You just want to run the exe. We'll drag this window down out the way because we're going to need it in a minute. And it opens kind of a terminal window here in the background. We're going to leave that open as well. Drag it where we can see it. And we want to drag these VRX files over here. So basically, when the tool is open here, you want to look into this little box over the top left corner. And basically, you just want to drag a file over to it. So just grab your video, drag it in the box, and you'll see it populates the video path, the OSD file path. Because it's in the same folder, it will automatically find it. And it assumes that you want to output it into the same directory, which is fine. It appends _generated on the end. And if you also want to include the SRT data, you can do that. But you do need to specify a font file. Now it does, right here in the window for the overlay tool, it does include the ArduPilot and Betaflight default fonts. If you're using 720p video, you'll grab the _24 file. If you're using 1080p video, grab _36. We're using 1080p, so we're going to go with the _36. Just drag that one into here, and you'll see it loads up what basically looks like the default ArduPilot font. But we can also grab the sneaky FPV fonts. Now, like I said, I'm using Contracts in my video receiver. And again, you have the 24 and 36. Just grab the 36.png. You can drag that one there, and you'll see this is what Contracts looks like. Or if you want to take a look at Sphere, you can do that. Did it load? Yeah, because this text appears different. So this is what the Sphere font looks like. Or we can come back and we can take a look at Blinder. Let's drag that one. You'll see it updates to a different font for Blinder. So you can use any font that you want. Even after the flight's over, you're done and landed, you can go back and use any font you want later. You know, if it's not the one you fly with, if you want to fly with one font, then upload videos with a different one, you're free to do that. Or if you just want to see what they look like, you're curious, you can try them out this way as well. Now you notice by default, it loads the OSD all the way into the top left, which I'm not using the full frame for my OSD. For one, I just like a little bit of margin on the sides, and I like to have room along the bottom here for that goggle or receiver info that's displayed live that I showed you earlier. So to solve that, there are some sliders here. You can just kind of move these over until things look right, and then you can zoom in or out a bit. Like you can zoom too far, or you can zoom out, make the OSD small if you want for some reason. But we're just going to kind of zoom in a little bit so that everything looks to be positioned about right. And now, like I said, you can include the SRT data if they are in the folder with the video, which these are. You just check the box, and it'll take that info from the subtitle file, and it'll burn it into the video right down there at the bottom. Now, if you see this font.ttf file right here in the folder for the generator, this is just a basic TrueType font file you can download. There's literally probably hundreds of thousands of free fonts online. And just get any other .ttf file and rename it font.ttf and drop it in the folder replacing this one. And it'll use a different font for these subtitle bits here. I'm not worried about that. I don't like to include that if, I guess there could be some reasons you might want to show it if you're kind of maybe talking about your signal and bit rate or whatever in whatever kind of video you're showing off. It would be handy to have it. But in this case, we're going to leave it off because it does render a little bit faster without it. And now at this point, just say you're ready to go. You're ready to render your file. We can do two things. You can generate a PNG sequence only, or you can render the video with the OSD. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and do both. And I like to use hardware acceleration for video encoding, which is an experimental feature right now, but it works fine for me. So we're going to include that. One other thing I want to mention right quick before I forget, kind of almost overlooked it. He has an option to hide sensitive OSD values, which is your GPS, altitude, and home distance. I guess if you were not following the rules and flying too high or too far away or whatever, you can check this box and it'll hide some of your sensitive values, the way as he calls it. Now it's not working in Autopilot. I don't know if it works in Betaflight. I do believe it works for iNav, but it's something that's gonna need to be worked on in a future release, is the last I had heard from Kirik about it. So it's not working for Autopilot right now, so I can't demonstrate it, but I can show you another quick tip later that we'll get to. But okay, so moving forward, like I said, we're gonna do both. But basically, if you want it to just generate the PNG sequence only, you click that and you can see it's going to run fairly quick. And if you look over here in this terminal window, you can see it kind of giving you live updates. It's generating these at about 375 frames per second, which is making about, and it seems to constantly increase, but it's making that many PNG images of your OSD. Just the OSD data on a transparent background. It's making like over 375 of them per second. And I believe it's going to be like tens of thousands of them. It's basically one for every frame of video. It makes your OSD overlay in transparent background image. And you can load that into your video editor and manipulate it, do what you want with it. And it's a pretty powerful tool and gives you almost limitless possibilities on what you can do with your OSD. And we're going to take a look at that in just a bit. But we're going to let this run right now. And you can see it basically takes about a minute. And I'm running on a AMD Ryzen 9 computer with 32 gigabytes of RAM and an NVMe drive. So it's probably a little faster than average computer that you might find in a retail shop. But it's not ridiculously fast or anything. I built it like about a year ago, I believe. But anyway, so that's done now. Now, I guess because this is already done, we'd probably have to restart all this. But basically, if you just want to burn this directly into your video output, into a video file and render it, it'll be avatar G0002 underscore generated.mp4, and it'll have this OSD burned onto the video file, ready to do whatever you want with it. And that does take about 5 to 7 minutes, I think, if I remember right. And I guess we're not going to do that because we'd have to restart all this to get this button to work again. So we're just going to go forward with this right now. So you can see it generated this folder down here. And like I said, this is just a list of all the transparent background images of your OSD. You can actually see this is my stats at the end of my flight. There's one for every frame of video. There's 25,741 frames there. So we don't really need to have that open anymore, so we can close this and this. And we're going to open Vegas Pro 20, which is what I edit all of my videos with currently. And we want to start by, let's reopen that folder. We want to drag the MP4 file onto the timeline. So now we have just the raw video with no OSD, as you can see. So now we want to import media. And we want to look in that VRX folder, and we want to look into that new folder that we generated. I'm going to just select the first image and then check open sequence. Hit open, and it already defaults to the correct size and resolution, and frame rate should be 60 to match your recording. Everything loads up right. Just hit OK, and you don't have to, but I like to rename them. I'll just name this one OSD2 to go with video file number 2, or if it was the number 1, we name it OSD1, whatever. And we want to insert a video track. I'm going to drag it. It's actually already on top, so let's just drag this OSD image sequence on the top. And now you can see we have an overlaid OSD. And you'll notice it's missing the info along the bottom and the goggle icons, because again, this is just your flight controller OSD. Now, because we have it on 2 separate tracks in the video editor now, we can manipulate it in many ways, basically almost unlimited. We can just mute the track to turn it off. We can turn it back on. Just say you want it to hide this section of video or whatever, we can just mute this one to hide the OSD just in this section of video. You have OSD, now you don't, now you do. Just for an example, so we can undo that. You can use your slider over here to make your OSD transparent to whatever degree you want. Just say if you want the OSD data in the video, but you want it maybe not as obtrusive, you can make it transparent. Like I said, to whatever degree you want. Like we said, the hide sensitive info thing for RGplane was not working. Just say I wanted to hide my altitude over here. Normally you would either blur it or just cover it up with a black or splotch of color or whatever, just hide it behind something. But what we can actually do here is we can load a video effect. We can load up a mask, and we want to invert this so that it hides what's inside the box. And we can hide just the altitude. Now we have the rest of the OSD, just no altitude. Or if we want to show the altitude, we can show the altitude. And like I said, you can split this up into different sections. Just say once you got past a certain distance or beyond a certain altitude, you could hide it from there on through the rest of the video. And it doesn't just have to be for anyone breaking the rules, hiding altitude or whatever. If you want it to hide your GPS coordinates, just say you want GPS coordinates so that you have them available, so that if you lose an airplane or whatever, you go down somewhere, you have your coordinates and have a good starting point to start looking from. But then you don't want to just publish those coordinates online so everybody knows where you've taken off and landing, finding your super secret awesome flying spots. You can just mask out those GPS coordinates so no one else sees them, but you have them available when you need them. And you can also do some cool things. Let's say we want to add another filter. We'll do a color corrector. And you can grab the low crosshair for your highs, which is your high color range is the white sections of your OSD, and you can colorize them. If my slider would work. So you can colorize the white portions of your OSD. And let's just say we want it to make it green, or we can make it yellow, or we can make it pink, or just whatever you want. Let's make this one kind of blue, I guess. And now you can drag the saturation up and down. You can desaturate the OSD completely, make it all black and white if you want to for some reason, or you can make the colors really pop. You can notice the red end there indicating north. You can kind of make it really pop, as well as the little GPS icon, little satellite icon down there. The green kind of pops when you drag it up. And now you notice your outline on your OSD, the border. If you drag the gamma down, you can kind of make the black border pop a little bit more if you want, or you can kind of fade it out some. Kind of makes the OSD washed out altogether, but you can manipulate these things without messing with the video in the background, basically. And again, with gain, you can make it all black if you wanted to, or white, or you just kind of play around with it, do what you want. Just kind of make it look how you want. Just, you have a lot of freedom just to do whatever you want. Basically, your imagination is the only thing kind of limiting you here. So, like I said, just using that OSD tool makes it an easy way to get the OSD back onto your video that you record. And it opens up all these possibilities on what you want to do with your OSD. So hopefully that clears up some things, answers some questions, gives you some ideas and some motivation. Once again, if you do appreciate the tool from Keurig and the custom fonts from Sneaky FPV, do go check them out. And if you're feeling generous and appreciative, do click the buy me a coffee links on their respective websites. And of course, thank you for watching this one. Any questions, comments, dislikes, likes, whatever, share the video if you find it helpful. I would really appreciate that. So we've been rambling on quite a bit now. This is a really long video for no flying and just kind of sitting here talking to a microphone and sitting at a computer. So we'll go ahead and end it now and keep an eye out for what's to come. As soon as the weather gets better, we're going to do some more flying with Walksnail. So until then, I will see you all later.